I'm Laura Iancu, and this is SEO in 2025.
Laura, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
And today, I'll talk a little bit about more humanistic approach to our trade as SEOs and share some insights about how I'm about to lead a project forward in 2025, mainly focusing on the crossroads between UX and SEO. I'll tell you a bit about how I intend to keep up with these two disciplines in 2025 by developing a strategy that's user-first rather than purely for search engines.
Okay, user first, and you talk a lot about UX and SEO, and I love your phrase, our trade as SEOs. That's a good way to look at it. So in terms of UX, do you have to be a UX designer to deliver a user-friendly website architecture, or is this something that SEOs can help to achieve as well?
Not at all. So this is one of my, I suppose, one of the things that I speak a bit with the department in my company, that we don't all need to know what everyone else is doing, but it's nice to know a little bit. So, for instance, whenever you collaborate with your UX department, there's this trend where they hear about SEO and they're like, oh, okay, so what do they want from me? I don't really understand what SEOs are doing, And I found it that it's easier to take it upon myself to learn a little bit more about UX and then sort of explain to them in their terms how I can integrate with their work.
So how would an SEO do that? What have you learned? Yeah, and what can SEOs say to a UX team to get them on board?
Learn the basics. So learn a few tools. Not all of us are extremely creative. I'm a little bit not gifted in that sense, but I did start as a web developer initially. So I understand a little bit more about website architecture and content hierarchy and things that are sort of easier to explain to a UX designer before they start developing a project. And I always say, just learn the basics. You don't have to go to these like highlands and sort of just make them feel like you want to steal their jobs kind of thing.
So what was this phrase, content hierarchy? I like that. Does that relate to breadcrumbs?
Could be, yeah. It could be everywhere around your website, from the way you structure your headlines, for example, to any element on your website. It's just guidelines, really. Like a lot of people, they take it very, let's say, how do you say it? In French, it's mot à mot. So they sort of just take it as it is rather than testing on their own website. But I think it's important to just stick to the basics before you actually create your own bits. Another way to do it is just sort of talk to your designers and say from the get-go, what the navigation do you want to look like? Do you want it to look like, and just sort of go through the simple practices. That's it. Don't overcomplicate things.
So an SEO doesn't have to know everything that a UX specialist does.
No, and that is the issue, I suppose, because we're all sort of forced in a way to wear all these hats, and we get to a point where we become a bit of jack of all trades. And I think that's dangerous, especially if you're on entry level, because you get a little bit overwhelmed with all of this information coming from all of these directions, and it just ends up in a big of mishmash in your head.
But SEOs are guilty of doing that as well, delivering
We are.
verbal diarrhea and trying to share too much with people, going all technical when they're asked to explain a fairly simple concept to people. So what are the key aspects of SEO that a UX designer should be aware of, that an SEO should share and not share other things?
And not sure. So first of all, when it comes to talking to your UX department, I will emphasize and saying we're not here to steal your jobs. We're just here to make the website more functional. And if you want sexier for the search engines, so whatever your design sort of mood board looks like, I'm not there to like have a look around and just change it for the sake of changing it. Whatever I'm coming to the table with is simply to make it look nicer and readable for the search engine. That's all. So I suppose that's sort of like what they need to know. It's like no threat.
Are there rapid changes happening in UX that SEOs need to be on top of, or is this a discipline that's fairly set in stone now?
Yeah, it's about continuous learning with everything, isn't it? For instance, in the SEO community, there's a couple of Slack channels and obviously different newsletters and top voices on LinkedIn that most of us, I suppose, we do follow nowadays. And sometimes it's the easiest way to get your information from because these people, they usually test and test and test and sort of they get to a point where they can actually show you something with data. And it's easier to make decisions when you see the data in front of you. And it's the same for every discipline, including in UX. That's why I think UXR is such an important bit. I suppose it's not necessarily something that an SEO does, like user experience research. I mean, I don't know many people who voluntarily log into their websites and create accounts and sort of just go around and leave opinions on designs and so on. Like, for instance, I'm a Figma addict. Like, I'll be in Figma every day, and even if I don't have a project ongoing, I'm still going in there to see what's happening and just sort of see, oh, right, so I see this. For example, I'm quite obsessed with mobile friendly, and I think at this point it's kind of, the thing anyway, because we know that Google prioritize mobile first indexing. And I remember the first time I went into Figma and I saw the process of an actual designer building a wireframe for mobile. I was like, it looks amazing, but like SEO wise, I feel like it could be a bit improved. So I had it in the back of my head that they haven't necessarily consulted that department before. I could already see where I could have stepped in and be like, okay, have you run a Lighthouse report on this before you actually publish this wireframe? Like why are your images missing all text? Why don't you have there's little simple things actually. It's not overly complicated, and you don't have to be over technical to like sort of see these gaps. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent.
That's
now
right. No, a couple of tools that you
it's-
mentioned there as well. And let's just get back to them for a second. So Figma is, according to Google, the collaborative interface design tool. If no one's heard of that,
Correct.
So it's an online platform that you can do to essentially create wonderful looking designs that I guess HTML designers can go away and create web pages out of.
Yeah, correct. You don't have to be an HTML designer. You can just be an enthusiast, I suppose. I think the main point of attraction when it comes to Figma is it's quite easy to create a workflow and see how, not a workflow, sorry, how the website flows. Sorry, English not my first language, you can tell.
You're doing exceptionally well.
Yeah, thank you. So sort of just follow how your user would go on your website pretty much. And it's easier to visualize it and then sort of realize where it could get stuck. So where a user can get stuck and facilitate that journey for them. Adding more buttons, for example, or perhaps a different breadcrumb structure, or there's really little things that you can do to sort of just improve that for them. And I think Figma is a very nice sort of point of interest for both UX and SEO because it's easier to collaborate in that sense. And then if you want to take it a step further and you're a little bit more technical and understand a bit of HTML and CSS, and you can actually involve developers in it as well.
You also mentioned Google Lighthouse, and you say that the accessibility tab in Google Lighthouse and a screen reader can be your best friend. What do you mean by that?
I mean, that's a story all this time, isn't it? When you look at accessibility, most people will address, using a screen reader because the screen readers are very good at picking up missing things on page, or, as I said in the beginning, a bit of a strange content hierarchy, for example. What I would add on this, and it's a funny thing because I was talking to a friend the other day about it, is that accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities. We could benefit from that as well. I mean, we're not always, able to use both our hands, or sometimes you're in the...
Or even listen, yeah.
Yeah, you're in the metro, you want to listen to an article, for example. And I mean, it's nice that it's flexible for Google. Obviously, we know that prioritize accessibility now, and obviously you're gaining a lot by not treating it as just something to be ticked and taking it seriously. And yeah, I mean, it's not overly complicated, really. It's just finding the time to actually dedicate in making it look tip top in that sense.
So one challenge with accessibility nowadays is the fact that there are so many different screen sizes, and many organizations have their websites initially viewed on a mobile device. What are your thoughts on ensuring that your content, your site looks wonderful on a mobile device?
I use my colleagues as testers. I really do. Obviously, it's quite easy to see, you've got so many tools that you can use at this point to sort of see how, simulate how it would look like on different devices, from your simple, inspect elements and see your screen sizes there, to, again, Figma, where you can create directly on the primarily device that you want to be used. Like, for example, if you're creating for an app. But what I tend to do is do a bit of A/B testing with the people in the company. And even if I'm just launching like a little thing, just a feature on the website, like another subscription box or something as easy as that, I will tend to like ask people to check it on their different mobile, like we've got tablets in the office, we've got mobile, Samsungs, we've got everything. So it's just a little bit of a mini A/B testing, if you want.
And talking about testing, you advise that SEO should practice by constantly auditing competitor websites. So what does this look like? What does this process look like?
It depends. Depends what stage you're in. If you're in the beginning, there's a lot. We won't have time to get into the entire detail. But in the beginning of a project, you've got a lot of work to do. Depending on the type of business you work for, obviously, there's various steps you can take. If your business, for example, relies on an app, there's going to be different steps than if you rely on a desktop version and so on. What I tend to do is start with a bit of a workflow. I usually use Asana or some sort of agile work frame where I involve a couple of the people involved in the project, not everybody in the beginning. And we sort of just start with a nice brainstorm. Sometimes some of them will have more insights than the project manager, for example. It's nice to sort of just see what everyone knows in the beginning about whatever competitors we would possibly have, because it's very interesting to see the scale of which they're thinking about these things. Like, let's take a comparison platform, for example, because that's something I'm working on at the moment. In the UK, you have some giants, right? Which it's extremely hard to compete with nowadays. Their trust signals are over the moon. They're honestly there for a reason. And then let's say you want to launch something similar, you'll have people in the office thinking, oh right, so your main competitor would be something like Compare the Market, whereas another person might see something a little bit smaller, like maybe a niche website or something that you didn't think about when you started your user research. So yeah, it's a very long process, to be fair. It's all agile, if you ask me. So it's going to be quite dynamic, and it could change from week to week.
So change on a regular basis. I mean, you said week to week there. I mean, is it worthwhile maybe saying once a quarter, we'll have a meeting, we'll have a brainstorm to establish if there are any new competitors that we weren't aware of beforehand?
Yeah, that is when your project is live. I was expressing in the beginning of a project, yeah. But of course, once you go live, then that's a quarterly thing. Sometimes even probably more often than that, depending on how well you go with it.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
Okay, yeah. So in short, scale back. So scaling back on tasks that are less impactful in the long run. Stop obsessing over minor tasks, such as updating your content every week. And then I suppose focus on mastering the fundamentals. So go back to the basics and look at your site architecture. Look at your mobile usability and accessibility.
Laura Iancu is founder at SEOpedia and SEO manager at Lead365, and you can find her over at seopedia.uk. Laura, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thanks for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at seoin2025.com.